Well, good morning. Thank you for attending our panel this morning. We're going to talk about bridging the trust gap in sustainability and specifically around sustainability reporting. Before I introduce the panel, I wanted to share a few facts and why it's important for us, specifically as a bank and as the venture arm of the bank. The first fact is, if you can come in, thank you. I would say the first fact is we're far behind in terms of reaching the commitments and reaching the goals that we've set at the Paris Agreement. And they're really alarming consequences, and whether it's sea levels that are rising, it should concern every Singaporean, as a matter of fact. You're an island, so if it doesn't concern you, it's an issue. We also see the temperature rising and way beyond the commitments that we had signed up for at the Paris Agreement, which were already alarming. We were committing to an increase of 1.5, and the way that it's looking right now is probably an increase of 2.5 to 3 degrees. So you can imagine the consequences on our livelihood and our energy consumption and so forth. So I think we're all aware of these facts, but I'm not sure we're doing anything. As a bank, SCB conducted the Adaptation Economy Report earlier this year, and what we uncovered was if we were to invest $30 billion by the next 10 years in the top 10 emerging economies, we'd be able to get a 12 times return in terms of GDP recovery. So I work in the venture business. A 12-time return on any investment, I would sign up for that any day. If we delay that, and if we delay it by the next 10 years, we'll have to spend twice as much. So that's the scale that we're talking about. So as a bank, and I will stop self-promoting, but as a bank, we've committed to mobilize $300 billion over the next 10 years in green financing. That's our commitment, but we can't do it alone, obviously. And we need to be able to measure what we're doing. And so this is why measurement and sustainability measurement for us is the first key step, okay? I'll introduce our panel and we'll go straight into the discussion. So I'd like to first welcome Lynette. Lynette, you're the CEO of Huma, which is one of our ventures incubated at SC Ventures. Lynette, thanks for joining. Boris, you're one of our key members in the sustainable finance team at SCB, and you're head of data and digital innovation specifically. Thanks for joining. Alex, you've been on a few of our panels, so thanks for always showing up. You're at Schneider Electric, a big energy company, and you're in charge of sustainability and sustainability enablement with the corporates that are clients of Schneider Electric. And Sid, you're part of Olam. We're doing a lot of things with Olam, and specifically head of digital at Olam Ventures. So thanks for joining us. Before I start, let me ask the audience, how many of you are concerned about sustainability? If not everybody raises their hands, it's an issue. Okay. And how many of you are actually work in sustainability or have sustainability as part of their jobs or objectives? Okay, great. So we'll be able to ask questions at the end. Let's keep it interactive, by the way. So if you want to ask questions, just feel free to jump in. But I'll start with my first question to the panel. It's really to anyone. But why are we not reaching our numbers? What is the issue? Why are we not being able to reach our commitments that we've made? Maybe a personal and a business point of view. Whoever wants to take it.
Okay, so maybe I'll give it a shot. So first I'll just touch upon Olam a bit before we talk about ventures and to answer your question. So Olam, for those who are not familiar with Olam is a global food and agri major. And every day our businesses confront some of the largest, most complex challenges which are facing our world, right? When it comes from whether it's climate impact, whether it's biodiversity loss, whether it's poverty, whether it's hunger, right? And what we have seen from our own experience is that many organizations don't know where to start, right? So I think the first message is always, there's never a way, you're never going to be perfect out of the gate. So the thing is to start early, I think there was a BCG survey last year which said that 90% of enterprises do not have a comprehensive program to even measure their carbon emission scope 1, 2, and 3. And more than 40% of them do not have a clue as to how to handle scope 3, right? So I think it's just the fear and anxiety of that, not knowing how to approach it. First of all, we can get into more details probably later in this session. And I think that's where, I think the starting point is just get started.
Thank you. So, as Harold mentioned, I'm part of Schneider Electric. We in Schneider Electric, we are helping a lot of our customers in reaching net zero, and what we have realized is that this is a component of two things. You have on one hand the fact that you don't know what to do, you don't know where to start, you don't know how you will do it. So it's a matter of...
As a corporate.
Yes,
as a corporate.
Indeed, yeah. So it's a matter of having a clear strategy and vision, having a clear roadmap, having a very comprehensive strategy in the end, right? And then secondly, it's a matter of measuring, right? How do you measure your baseline? You have to know where you are today. How do you measure progress? Have you made progress? Are you going forward? Maybe you had some hypotheses that don't work, right? So you need to take some corrective action. So on the other hand, I think measuring and having a good measurement is a key component here.
I think the intent is there for the corporates, and especially the big corporates. The intent is there to decarbonize, to make efforts in terms of sustainability. But to your point, they don't really know where to start, and they don't know how to measure it, right? Maybe on the financing side of things. So,
sure.
But I mean, you're in charge of, you're in charge. You're part of the team that provides sustainable financing. Maybe you can explain what that is actually. What do you guys do?
Yeah, thanks, Harold. First of all, I want to thank you for articulating our vision so clearly about the 300 billion mobilization on behalf of the bank. Actually, we are an emerging market bank, and we observe that across the 53 markets that we operate in, actually over half of them don't really have a net zero target. So actually, it's still a nascent area for the emerging markets. So with that macro picture in mind, when it comes to financing, the issue we encounter is actually, to Alexandru's point, is about data. So net zero is a key target for Standard Chartered. We have actually set net zero targets for 8 of the high emitting sectors that we finance, and 4 are underway. But the issue we encounter is that when we want to measure the actual achievement against target, we always have to almost rely on external data providers such as S&P to get the data, and most of the time these data only cover public company and large companies. And if we want to go deeper to very proper segue into today's panel topic, right? When we want to go deeper into the SME segments, the data is actually not available or is not measured properly. And very often we would need to rely on proxies to track our progress, and which is not ideal. So I think the 2 points I wanted to make is, one is a macro picture. The world is actually coming into grips of this very serious topic. And on the other hand, in terms of data availability, it's also something we're grappling with.
And you talk about corporates, you talk about the excess of public information, but maybe, Lynette, because your solution, maybe you can talk a little bit about your solution, and specifically about SMEs. Because I think while the big corporates have net zero goals, most of them do, right? I think the SMEs are still behind. So if you could share a little bit your experience around that.
Sure. So I'm from Puma, and basically we help companies of all sizes with their ESG due diligence process, which means we want to enable them to have a record and a passport of what they're doing and make this information accessible to financial institutions and larger corps. I think one of the biggest problems that why we are not reaching the targets in time is there's this language of sustainability in large corporates. They are struggling, like what you guys have mentioned, inaccurate data, administrative burden, and trying to deal with it. Can you imagine, like in a large corporate where there's like 200, 300 people, you're struggling with it. How about the SMEs, which are like 10, 20, 50, up to 100 packs? So I think this is causing quite a big delay in allowing us to achieve the net zero targets that we have set. We have to enable, we have to help the MSMEs to come on board, because it is really an ecosystem play. Sustainability doesn't just sit with the regulators or with the MNCs. So we have to find a way to get the MSMEs on board this journey, so that we can at least get in the race to hit the targets that we have set ourselves.
Is there a problem with standards? Is there, I mean, and this is maybe a little bit of education on my end, but it seems that depending on where you are, what industry, what regulator, you have different standards. How come there's not one standard?
Okay, so in the current market, there's about 600 over standards and frameworks that we have to adhere to, besides the regulatories. To be fair to the standards, it makes it very complex for companies to report to them. But they do have different alignments. Like if I'm doing TCFD, which is the Task Force for Climate Finance, your focus is on climate, your focus is on finance. But if you are doing the World Economic Forum, there's a little bit more tilted focus on social. It's about how to get all this together and what kind of measurements. So I would say that the need to still have certain amount of frameworks that is a mixture of environment, social, and governance will always be around, because our businesses in different countries, we are businesses in different industries and sectors. It's a process just to sieve all this out so that people can understand what they're supposed to report to, what they're supposed to work on and action upon. Yeah, we can't insist our corporate language on the SMEs if we want things to move ahead. Yeah.
And to your point, I think industry-specific pathways, right? Because that is so critical. Exactly as you rightly said, each industry will have its own nuances, and being able to define industry-level pathways is itself, let's say, a huge ambition to reach. And if the regulators can assist in each industry being able to define, okay, which are the material areas that they should focus on, what are the standards which will be relevant for that industry, I think it will make it easier. Right now, indeed, it's very complex. It's just not, and again, that complexity is, I think, just, you mentioned about large corporates, being on this journey, my personal feeling is that even for large corporates, I think they struggle. Just as an anecdote, right, for a company like Olam, it took us 3 years of doing life cycle assessments with experts to be able to arrive at a total footprint that was something like 67 million tons. And I could even share an interesting anecdote as how one of our ventures very quickly showed us that even that was not adequate. So I think it's fallacious to think it's only the MSMEs that would face challenges. I think the large corporates, because MSMEs will be such an important part of Scope 3, that unless they can figure out how to get MSMEs on this journey, there's no way the large corporates can move forward as well.
I think you mentioned Scope 3. I'd like to go back to Scope 3 just to get everybody on the same level, right? So that we know what Scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions are. I think let's just go back to that. But would you say now there's a strong intent from everyone to tackle that issue at least? Or are we still, and I'm going to use a term, I'll be careful of the term, but are we still facing greenwashing?
I feel that, in terms of standards, the world is actually realizing the proliferation of standards. This problem has been persistent for a while. And what we observe is that in the industry, there's a deliberate effort to bring different standards into one to converge. So what we see is, for example, the ISSB actually has brought together a few standards into one for companies to follow. And when it comes to SME though, I think the challenge is that we need to pick metrics and data that are proportionate and that are material, which is something that cannot be a one-size-fits-all solution based on ISSB. And to your point, Harold, on Scope 3, basically there are 15 categories of Scope 3. And we need to be granular about what we're doing, what we're defining for each of the scope, each of the areas. And for the bank, for example, the finance emission is one of the key areas. So we would need to be going to that level of granularity in order to set the standard.
And I was actually reading recently a report that said 90% of investors would welcome a sustainable practice in their investment strategy. So that's almost everyone. And on M&A transactions, 50% of M&A transactions in 2022, so past year, didn't complete because of lack of information around sustainability practices. A lack of information or a lack of trust in the information. So that should be an incentive enough. I mean, if you're willing to sell your business, and unless you abide by certain standards, you'll not be able to sell it. That should be an incentive. But maybe going back to the SMEs. When you're an SME, especially in an emerging country, it's a matter of, you know, almost life and death, right? It's you need to struggle for your business, right? And it's all about the economies of that business. How do we incentivize these SMEs to do the right thing and to decarbonize and so forth? What are some of the strategies?
I think for us at Schneider Electric, we look at this. We look at it from two angles. So number one, here in Singapore, we have a special program together with the Economic Board of Singapore to decarbonize Singaporean MSMEs. So we got a lot of support from the government, and what we do is whatever we apply to Fortune 500 companies, we localize that, and we did it at a scale for SMEs in order to help them track their roadmap and also create their roadmap or whatever they need, right? So that's on one hand. On the other hand, we at Schneider Electric, we have around 50K suppliers. Many of those suppliers are SMEs. Now, if you look at the corporate, you will have to decarbonize Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3.
Do you mind explaining, just for everyone, Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3 in 1 minute?
Yes, in 1 minute. Okay, let me do it a bit.
Solve the problem in 1 minute.
So Scope 1. Scope 1 is the emissions that your operations are emitting. Scope 2 is your energy, right? So basically, if you buy brown energy, if you use... Is it better?
Yeah.
So, should I go to Scope 1 back?
Scope 1.
Scope 1. Okay, so Scope 1 is your operational emissions, so whatever your operations are emitting. Scope 2 is your energy. If you buy brown energy, if you use brown energy, that should be offset or reduced. And then Scope 3, which is the most interesting of all, it's around value chain emissions. So we look at suppliers, but not only suppliers, we have to look at partners. For example, we sell through channels, contractors, distributors, so on and so forth. They fall under Scope 3. We have to look at our customers. We have to support our customers as well. But let me deep dive a bit into suppliers. Most of these suppliers are SMEs, right? So in order for you as a corporate to be net zero, value chain net zero, which is the aim for everybody, you will need to offset your Scope 3. So you will need to support your suppliers in getting towards net zero. So I think, for example, we started in 2020 to do Scope 3. So we started to engage our top 1,000 suppliers, and we started to learn on how to do that, because it's a massive work, it's not easy. I think from my perspective, Scope 1 and Scope 2 is in your hands, right? It's your emissions. You can basically offset them, you can do actions to them, but Scope 3, you have your suppliers, your partners, so on and so forth.
So yeah. How do you convince them? How do you convince them?
Okay, I think most of them are convinced, right, that they need to do something.
Because they want the business, or because they...
You cannot, I don't think you can say that you can be my supplier if you are only, let's say, net zero or going towards net zero. But I think everybody, as we were asking the room, everybody is committed to sustainability, but some have more means and others have less means. So we want to make sure that we help them have the means to reach net zero. So as we are helping our customers, that we are helping our suppliers, SMEs or not, in order to build a roadmap, in order to track their emissions, in order to make progress.
And so maybe on the well, do you want to go?
Sure. I think I'll share from my perspective as a person who's been in the SME space for 20 years. What will make me want to do something? I'll go back to why I want to start a business in the SME space. That's risk, right? Because I like the freedom to make my own decisions. So that's why you start your own business. You control your own time. Second reason why is you want to make money, and you want to make sure that your staff can bring home their pay and make sure everybody in the house has got food on the table. So those are the two main priorities for any SME's business owner, I would say. So how do I get them to want to embark on this sustainability journey? Does it mean more profit for me? Does it mean more business for me? So this will be the two key drivers that will want me, that I will be driven to say, take on additional 1 year of work to do the measurements, because I'm afraid of losing business opportunities. So say for example, I have a small central kitchen, I supply to my big folks like the likes of Hyatt Hotel, Marriott's Group, like anyone else who loves to travel, you know, all these hotels, they take food supplies from me and I sell it to them. But I stand the risk to be cut off from the value chain. That means I will lose my business opportunities. That's when I have to start on my sustainability journey. It's not because I strongly believe in it. Honestly, a lot of them don't. Two priorities, freedom and revenue. So it's because I need to do it. If not, I have no business. I'm gonna be upfront about that. So that would be one huge driver for me to do so. Yeah.
I think we need to check your microphone.
They don't like me.
So what you were saying is basically there's what we're saying is there's a need to incentivize them, is what you're saying. Or there's a carrot that needs to be pushed in front of them in order to get them to decarbonize or to become more green. What are some of the carrots, Boris?
Very good question. So I think as a bank, actually we play a very big part in incentivizing, SMEs and other companies to decarbonize. Just to give you two examples, one is through our participation in industry efforts to standardize disclosures. So there are projects ongoing that Standard Chartered actually collaborates with MAS on to set up an AI-enabled data platform for different industry on ESG assessments. And then what we do is actually to provide input into the metrics and the data that are material, that are proportionate to companies when it comes to financing. When it comes to sustainability-linked financing, what would matter to us as a bank? I think that feedback loop actually provides the right incentive, the right framework, and the robust standard for SMEs and other companies to disclose. I think that's one of it. And then the second part is through our sustainable finance solutions, basically. We're a bank ultimately. So I think we work very closely with large companies to offer sustainable trade solutions to bank their sustainable supply chain, basically. So if you're a supplier and actually you work with a large company, and then if you have to enjoy our trade finance price and benefits, you would have to be sustainable. So that's how we incentivize SMEs and companies to follow a robust standard. I think it's basically through industry participation and through our product offerings.
Should we talk a little bit? I'm going to get that. This one? Better? Okay. Yeah, much better. Okay. So about you talked about the private market, right? And the incentives to this private market. But how much is the policymaker a part of that change? Do you think, you mentioned the MAS as being an enabler to providing this information. How much should public and private work together in order to tackle the decarbonization?
Well, if you don't mind, I'll chip in here because we see net zero data or ESG disclosures ultimately will converge to become a public utility. Actually, if you observe what the UN has been doing with CDP, they're actually launching something called the Net Zero Data Public Utility Project at COP28 this year. And as I mentioned, we're not a global standard setting company. We're actually a participant in the journey. And I think this ecosystem play that brings together the government, standard setting bodies, corporate, SMEs, and financiers would be the way to go to achieve a robust standard going forward.
Let's talk a little bit about innovation, right? Because I think we've spoken about the problem, we've spoken about the corporates, the SMEs, etc. But what are some of the innovations that are happening right now? And maybe, Sid, you can share some of the things that OLAM is doing and how you're tackling the problem.
Let me see. Okay. Thanks. So, I talked about why sustainability is very important for OLAM, right, given the challenges it faces and what are the problems we're trying to solve. So, Nupo Ventures was created as an extension, or the genesis is from the same part, that how can we build profit with purpose ventures which can make a sustainable impact on food, agriculture, and beyond. So the ventures which we have incubated under, and we are a venture studio, so we build ventures, so we don't invest in third-party ventures. So every venture that we incubate has to touch upon at least one or more of the SDGs and make a positive impact on that. And I'll give a couple of examples as to how we believe we could accelerate this journey. So for example, when I mentioned that for Olam to do its scope 1, 2, 3 emission computation, spending millions of dollars with outside experts over 3 years, we had done an assessment that our entire carbon emission is about 67 million tons, right? But we realized that it's such a complex and difficult journey to do that we said there must be a better way, right, of doing this. So out of that, the idea of Terrascope was born. So Terrascope is a end-to-end decarbonization B2B SaaS platform which helps corporates or enterprises to measure and manage their scope 1, 2, 3 emission, but with a lot of focus on scope 3. And for us, of course, Olam was customer zero. So using AI, ML, and of course manual interventions in the first part of the product cycle, we actually over about 14 to 16 weeks, we had estimated the carbon footprint for Olam. And along working with the sustainability teams were part of it, right? So we said, they have to anyway sign off on it. And actually at the end of that exercise, we realized that the 3-year exercise was off by 35% and in the wrong direction. So actually the starting point for us was more closer to like 90 million tons. And we are a Temasek linked company. We have a commitment to reduce 50% of our carbon emissions by 2030. And you can imagine if at the starting itself, our starting point goes up by 30-35%, it makes the challenge so much harder. And that's actually the valuable part, right? So people have to know where to start with, going back to what was said earlier in the discussion, that you must measure your starting point, because then you can identify impact areas and you can track progress on that. So that's one. So Terrascope helps now, and it's gone beyond food and ag as well, and helping companies to be able to do this in a much easier way. So that is one. The second just example I'll give of the venture portfolio that we had is that in food and ag, it's a very complex supply chain, right? Food has grown in 140, 150 different countries, consumed all over the world, it moves all over the world, and contributes to 30% of the carbon emissions globally, almost 16 gigatons approximately. But one of the challenges, and going back to your question as to what happens is people spend, including us, we spend a lot of time in terms of just measuring our ESG performance, right? Even to set a baseline and then to go forward. And because we had, let's say we invested money behind it, but not everybody can do so. And if everybody is investing money in defining how ESG should be measured, it's a problematic area. So actually we did a venture which is called TRACT, T-R-A-C-T, TRACT, which is a industry level collaboration. So with our industry peers like ADM, Cargill, Louis Dreyfus, I can say that because it's out of stealth, as I mentioned. And by the way, as competitors, as our CEO likes to say, we hate each other's guts. We don't talk to each other. But on this topic, we came together because what TRACT does is it basically standardizes industry level ESG measurement.
And just on this, are they equity partners? Or
equity partners. So
they're all equity partners?
So yeah, all equal shareholders in this. So, and the aim is to just basically have a unifying language, set the ESG measurement systems and tools in place, and then everybody can focus on impact. So that's just a couple of examples to share what we're doing.
I said I was not going to do self-promotion, but I'm going to do a little bit of self-promotion. We do the same thing, obviously, at SC Ventures. So we build ventures, and we made actually sustainability one of our core themes, and that's how committed we are to it as well, right? Because I think unless you are an agent of change, then you can't expect other people to do it as well. So we see venture building as one way to innovate, and obviously the bank is doing a lot of things, as Boris was saying, but being able to launch lean ventures in a way that enables the better measurement, the better management of carbon footprint is also very important. And maybe Lynette, do you want to talk a little bit, because you're obviously one of my ventures, so do you want to talk about what advantage do you have as a venture over other companies?
Definitely, thank you. I think what's interesting as a venture that came from a CVC structure with the bank itself, it allows me the lens from various perspectives. Firstly is when I talked to, I think total to date about 320 SMEs, excluding 47 large corps. I hear their problem statements. I know what they are having issues with, what they struggle with. So like, for example, we allow them to, the smaller companies, to start from a reference point, which means to address the key areas. We help them to identify their critical areas where they need to report on. So we make it simplified for the users ultimately, because we understand where they're coming from. In terms of, because I come from where I'm exposed to talk to the likes of Boris, Evangeline, many of them from the finance sector. I'll share something that I came across on Friday. I went to asset management, which is a seminar that's very focused on sustainability space. I get to learn about the biggest gaps, what they are struggling with. Like one of the asset management side from another bank was saying that they buy data from like 12 different sources and they still don't trust the data because it was just extrapolated from various sources. So I get the benefit from a CVC venture that's under Harold, that from both sides, what do regulators want, what do asset managers want, what do financiers want. I get exposure to meet the clients from large corporates to really hear what are they struggling with. Is it scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, what is the direct and indirect scopes, what exactly, right down to the 15 areas that in scope 3, the value chain. I get to talk to the SMEs. I really understand what are they struggling with. I get to talk to ecosystem partners, like one of them right here. We find out what are the drivers. What exactly is the driver that I need to get the tenants of the building on board to make the changes, to come together, because sustainability is really an ecosystem play. Yeah, till today, I mean, FRS in accounting system is still sorting itself out. We expect too much of sustainability to be able to sort itself out over the last 10 years that it has evolved, in all honesty. So being in a CVC, incubated by Standard Chartered, is a good place to start because I could see from both ends what do they actually need, and not just coming from a large corp or not from a startup where I don't have the structure to enter the regulatory system to know exactly what's next. Yeah.
And I think the way we see it as well is obviously we're the venture arm as part of the bank, but if we want to enable partnership, like what you mentioned with OLAM as well, right? If we go as SCB, being able to bring partners to the table is going to be a little bit more time consuming than if we do it as a lean venture, right? And I think that's the reason why we think ventures provide optionality, adjacency to the core business, right? And ultimately, obviously, the bank benefits from it, right? And is an active agent as well. But it's a leaner way to do it. But going back maybe on the technology side of things, because we mentioned technology, how much is technology going to be a play in terms of decarbonizing and maybe in terms of measurement, but also in terms of maybe just AI, machines, etc. How much is this going to be part of solutioning the problem? Who wants to take this? You?
Yeah. So technology. I think technology will be part of each step towards net zero, right? We have a very clear, let's say, value proposition to our customers that through which we help them decarbonize, and it's a three-steps approach. First, we help them with the strategy, and we leverage a lot of technology when helping with the strategy. Then we help them with digitize. So basically, what does it mean? It means we help them set up their baseline and measure progress. So technology is a key piece here, right? Measurement is a very important part of what we do, and a very important part and critical. It can make it or break it for our customers in their road towards net zero. And the third one is about decarbonizing. So in the decarbonizing piece, what we do is two things. We help them be more efficient with their energy consumption. So there's a lot of technology and innovation that they need to adopt in order to replace things that are emitting a lot of carbon with other things that are not emitting a lot of carbon. And also we, whenever this is not possible, we help them offset. So we help them offset with carbon credits. And for carbon credits, there is a lot of technology needs in order to make sure that we produce high quality carbon credits. Actually, as part of Schneider Ventures, we built a venture in this domain that helps project owners to develop high quality carbon credits, or for example for renewable energy certificates, right? You can offset your scope 2 emissions. So remember, scope 2 is the energy that you consume. You can buy green energy from some solar farms, for example. But in order to make sure that you buy that energy, you need the technology of solar farms in place, and you need the backbone that will certify that you are the owner of that green energy. So again, in the decarbonization space, technology plays a key role as well.
And maybe on the data, again, data availability, I think going back to the trust of the information, right? Because obviously if you're going to provide, let's say, a green loan, you need to be able to rely on the data that is provided. So how do you see AI playing a role, or data accessibility playing a role?
Sure. I think banks usually are not the best place to drive innovation, if I have to say, but that's why I think... Except, well, you're not exactly a bank. But to be honest, I think that's why I think the partnership angle is very important. So, for example, when we are looking at sustainability-linked financing, we start to partner with Internet of Things companies, IoT companies, to embed devices into companies that we finance in order to track the actual energy consumption, the emissions, etc. So I think partnership is definitely one angle that a bank can leverage to drive innovation and to use technology. And other angle is actually, to your point, AI, because many of you would know that sustainability data is actually highly unstructured, unlike financial data. And the use case of AI here is basically immense, because you can use AI to basically capture and analyze the data which are unstructured in nature. And that would help a lot with us on the sort of risk management, financing decision, etc. So I think these are the two areas that I see an immense use case for banks to leverage.
I think technology makes it really, really wonderful. Like in Huma, we engage different kinds of technology to make sure that it works for the customers. For data collection bits, we actually look at like large language, just basic modeling to get the questions in place, to collect the data, to ensure that it's clean. We make it easier for people to input the data. For the next step, where we actually need to pull in the keywords, it's part of AI, but I would say we are using large language LLP processing, because it makes sense, it makes it quick identification. So our ultimate vision for Huma is to be able to do an active private ESG rating, which means we look at private companies. Why we started from reporting is because we need to collect the ingredients before we can cook a fine dining meal. And the last bit, we'll actually be using artificial intelligence, where we do the modeling and the machine learning processes. So these are the technology we'll use to articulate that final scores for financiers, for large corporates to make quicker decisions, for SMEs to know where they are at this point right now. So technology is invaluable. Without this is a very, very heavy human-driven processes. You can have thousands of analysts behind. It's going to cost so much that large corporates will struggle to move ahead with this, and small SMEs, they will have no chance of getting on board this journey. So I think innovation in the space, whether it's OLAM and SCV, with the bank, with collaboration, is really important if we want to keep the vision of hitting our net zero targets in place by 2050.
So, yes. So maybe I'll end, and we'll ask the questions, but I'll end with a question to you guys, because this is your business, right? Are we in a better position now to go on track and being able to reach net zero goals? Do you think we're on track? And do you think by 2050, 2060, we will be in a place where all the damage we've done to the planet will be resorbed? So, first question, are we on track? Yes, no? And your sort of predictions for the next 20, 50 years, whether or not we're going to be able to resolve all the issues we've done.
So, are we on track? I think it's not a yes or no question. Some of the organizations and some of the countries or governments are on track. Some of them are behind. Maybe few of them are a bit further on. But what I think is that we have a great momentum right now in this space. There is a lot of energy in this space, and if we manage to double down on that, we can meet 2050, 2060. If we lose the momentum or we lose our focus, there is a higher risk that we don't get it.
I think it goes back to the number I said at the beginning, right? If we invest now, we'll be able to tackle the problem a lot better, and we'll be able to get stronger returns. If we wait, it's just delaying the problem, spending more, etc. What's your view, Sid?
So I think we are on the right path because there is only one path, but we are not on track. So I think we should just be honest about that. Are we too late? Already yes, because we are losing 150 species every day to extinction. So for those species, it's already too late. But again, you have no choice. So you have to get there and get there fast.
Thank you. Boris?
Well, I would say we are on the right track. I'm not sure we're on track or not. But then I think we see a lot of concerted effort across different industries and even at the public-private partnership space. So I think we are all realizing the problem and we're really taking actions in the right direction. So, well, we are on the right track. So that's my answer to your question.
And
Yes.
then we'll open up for questions. Go ahead.
So, likewise, we are on track. We're a little bit far away from reaching the targets from what we are doing as a collaborative efforts. I think we wasted a couple of years while everyone's struggling with the sustainability language. Yeah, so we did waste some time where everybody was trying to claim supremacy between frameworks, between financing, between.
And that's over? You think we're over that?
We
now?
I see a little bit more easing out over the last 5 years where people start to get more collaborative, deep dive into the individual plus points of what each company or each sector is bringing to the ecosystem. So I'll say hopefully that helps us accelerate this pathway. We've gone past educate, initiate, and accelerate. We need to actually initiate as an ecosystem and accelerate on this path if we want to meet the targets that's been set. So regardless of which way you have set it, there is a target on top of our heads that we need to meet. Yeah.
All right, well, thanks a lot. We'll open up for questions. Any questions? Yeah?
Hello, thank you very much. So I have a question on the reporting side of things. For instance, Siddharth mentioned that after a while you realize that the emissions you calculated in the beginning was wrong. So what is your opinion on using a technology like blockchain to put the data on chain for transparency and creating that trust? I'm asking this because I have a company in blockchain, so just interested.
I assumed that was.
I'm sure there are more informed people here, but very quickly. So first, let me say yes, it is absolutely will be very useful. So that should give you more encouragement from your idea of venture. The second is the data is only. I mean, whatever is on blockchain, the data is only as good as it is, right? Yeah. So if the systems and processes which are underlying the data to collect the data with the standards and all of that, if that's good, then definitely putting it on a blockchain and making it easier to use and share and all of that, 100% agree. But I'm sure there are others who know this space better.
Maybe we'll just keep one answer for now.
Yeah.
That's okay. Because
thank you very much.
In the interest of other questions, I'm sure there's other questions. Come on, guys. It's okay. Any questions is fine.
So Byron Gardner from Standard Chartered Bank. To Sid, I know pretty well the dynamics within your industry and the hate that you have for each of your peers. I'm fascinated though with the fact that you've managed to overcome that and create positivity at an industry level. And considering some of the biggest emitters are within commodities, whether it be metals and mining, whether it be energy, how did you create that environment where you all came together with a common purpose? Because that's an amazing achievement in my mind.
Okay, thank you. I think there are three parts to that answer. So the first part is, of course, I think a lot of credit goes to Sunny, who's a CEO, who has a very, very well-established position in this industry. So he's able to coalesce people together and get them onto this topic really well. So I think that's credit where it's due. The second is, I think, of course, as always, financial incentives are very much part of this, right? And if you look at the challenges in the food and ag space, I won't even go into consumers in terms of how they see sustainability and are they really willing to pay for it, but that apart, there's a fundamental lack of faith, right? Even if I go or you go into a shop and we say, okay, this is Rainforest Alliance or this and we're going to have to pay a few dollars more for that. Would we pay? We would say, we're not very sure. Is it really there, not there? No matter what kind of fancy QR codes and whatever you do, right? So I think building that trust and credibility, and therefore what our customers would tell us, say, okay, hey, as Olam, you have a great platform to bring data and to show that what your ESG performance in our value chain is. But I'm only buying 20% from you, right? I'm buying 80% from so many other suppliers. I cannot use this data to convince my consumers to that what I'm doing is really sustainable. So it makes sense only when the entire industry adopts it. And I think everybody saw this. It just needed that fire to get them together. Actually, we got 30 companies, including the likes of Nike and all who are on this, because the similar problems, that everybody's facing on this. I hope that answers.
Okay, we have time for 1 or 2 more questions. You wanted to ask a question? And then we can network afterwards, okay?
So some of you mentioned that we might not be fully on track yet. If there's one thing you could ask policymakers, like one thing that could change to really accelerate, would there be something on your wish list?
Funding.
Or for anyone.
So I'm just going to say funding. So
I think funding is one piece, right? That the funding is
public and private. Funding, but there'll be others.
Public and private. I think it's concrete frameworks for us to enable it, right? And I think in Singapore or in mature economies, the frameworks are there. I'm not sure it's the case in emerging economies, right? Where there's GDP, I would say GDP objectives and so forth. I mean, that's my answer, but what about you, Boris?
I think one of the things we observed working quite well is blended finance. So basically it's the provision, the public-private partnership, the provision of concessionary capital combined with private capital to drive projects that would otherwise be unviable. So I think that's one thing that I would like to see more, and we would like to see more in the financing space.
Okay, one last question there?
So for someone who is like, there's this jungle of standards and you've talked about it at length. What's the standard or the standard brand that's emerging for all of us to look at?
Yeah, that's a really good question. What is the standard? What should be the standard? Is there one standard, whether framework, whether brand, whether etc.?
Why do I always get the hardest question? I think the first attempt was integrated reporting many years ago, and the new one is ISSB that's coming up. Due to a competition, I was working with some regulators on this. They were looking at potentially S1 first, how to deal with the ISSB in S1. It will be the first step forward. I think what has happened throughout this period with the standards and the frameworks in the ecosystem marketplace, it's tough for people who has been reporting, say, for example, to SASB and swap over to GRI, if they've been doing it for the last 5 years. They've spent a lot of money doing that kind of report. So the expectations from us as a financial institution, or from the regulators, from associations, has to be tempered to a certain extent, where we could accept different kind of reports and get the data that we need. So in the first place, we have to define the data that we want that helps us make our decision-making processes. So in terms of frameworks-wise, there'll be many that try to pull in together. It will take a while to settle. I'll be very honest about it.
So I guess short answer, there's no standard yet,
yes.
Right?
Yes.
And Boris, what do you think? I mean, on the financing side of things.
Well, on the bright side, as I mentioned, there is an intention to converge. So I think one thing that you might want to start looking at is the ISSB standard that Lynette mentioned. But that's very overarching. If you want to go to industry-specific standards, I think SASB is a very good place. It has 77 sectors to a very granular level. And as I mentioned, I think in terms of ESG disclosures, being proportionate and material are very important, and that as SASB does exactly that. So I would recommend that.
Great. Well, we have to end it here, but thank you very much. Thanks for we have time to network afterwards, so we have a little session. So feel free to network with us and ask questions. Thank you very much.